Today in the wood yard, we're talking about the 5 best ways to sharpen a chainsaw coming up right now. Thanks for being here today, folks. My name is Chris. In case you're here for the first time, if you've been here before, thanks for coming back. So today we're going to talk about 5 different ways that you can sharpen a chainsaw chain. Some people might say there only are a couple, but nope, there's actually 5. Some of them are a little bit weird, but there's 5 that I found anyway. What we're going to talk about is the ways that work the best, which ways are the cheapest, which ways are the most expensive, which ways are the fastest. So that's what we're going to talk about. So first we're going to start out number 5. The 5th way, I'm going to start from 5 and go backwards to number 1. Number 5. This is the way that I actually know a guy that does this. He's a kind of a distant relative, and he had a chainsaw on his property and was cutting firewood. And I went to help him one day, and his chainsaw was throwing smoke off and sawdust was flying out, and all it was powder. And I said to him, I says, "Why don't you sharpen your chain?" I said, "I can do it for you." He said, "Oh, I didn't know that you could sharpen them." He said, "I always just buy a new chain." So there you go. Way number 1, buy a new chain. Now this guy cuts maybe a cord a year, tops, if that, maybe half a cord. And all he uses it for is for cutting trees down that have fallen across the road on his property, a little bit of campfire wood, and he would just go buy a new chain like every year, every other year. He said he would just cut till it was dull and you get a new chain. So there's a way to sharpen your chain. Number 4. This is a way to sharpen your chain that doesn't require much effort. It requires you to take your chain in to get sharpened. You can go to a hardware store. You can go to a chainsaw shop. If there's a dealer in your area that has chains, saws, things like that, they'll be able to sharpen your chain. It could be a steel dealer. It could be a Husqvarna dealer. Or it could be just some guy that has a shop where he sharpens stuff. There are guys in every town that have sharpening services offered, and they have skills. They can sharpen knives, they can sharpen scissors, they can sharpen lawnmower blades, they can sharpen chainsaw chains like this. They can sharpen these things. You take them in, have them sharpen them. They can do it, and it doesn't cost that much. $3, $4, $5, maybe $6. So when your chains get dull, you don't have to go through the effort of buying equipment or learning how to hand file or all the things that are necessary to keep your chain in top-notch order. So take it in, have it sharpened. Pretty easy. So if you got a chainsaw and you got 1 or 2 chains, get another chain so you got a sharp one on your chainsaw at all times. Take the other ones in, get them sharpened. It's pretty easy and it's pretty fast. There you go. Number 4. Number 3, hand filing. Hand filing is probably the cheapest way to do it because you can get a file brand new for a couple bucks. You buy them in bulk, you get them for $1 a piece. If you go to a hardware store, you might pay $4 or $5. And the drawback is that hand filing is probably the hardest to learn. It takes the most time, takes the most technique. It's something you have to work at. It's not just going to happen. So for those of you that do hand file, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't, practice, practice, practice. It's not something you're going to pick up overnight. You're going to have to try a lot, and by trial and error you will learn. What's nice about hand filing is you can do it anywhere. You can take the file right out into the woods with you and you can have it right there and you can sharpen it up right on a stump or on a log. If you hit something that dulls your chain, if you hit a rock or the ground or a nail or a piece of barbed wire, all that fun stuff, you can sharpen it right in the woods, which works really good. So now one of the things about hand filing, I would say, is that it's the most portable. I mean, you can take these anywhere. You don't need batteries for them. They're just always ready to go. So hand filing is a way, and I'm going to drop some footage in here on a voiceover right now. So here's a little hand filing. Now as you see the file going, you can see metal filings coming off of there. And it only takes 3, 4, maybe 5 strokes on average, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. What you want to do is get that top plate to be a clean, straight, even edge. And the very tip of the tooth itself, a lot of times there's a little white dot that means that the tip of the tooth isn't real sharp. And you got to get to where it's like cat claw sharp, so when you touch it, it just digs right in. Now, some of these teeth here, you can see they're not terrible, but again, just touching it up so that you get maximum sharpness with every tank that you run through your saw. I generally will sharpen my saws every tank. It's rare that I'll go to a second tank without touching it up, because I want it to be as sharp as possible at all times. So a few strokes, as you can see, you do all one side, and you just keep going until you get them all sharp. See, now you notice a couple of the teeth there was just 1 or 2 strokes, and there's other ones just 4 or 5, because some of the teeth are sharper than others and some are duller. So sometimes you got to sharpen a little bit more. And you do want to clean your file off occasionally as you're going. So here you can see another set of teeth being sharpened, and these teeth here on this particular saw are much duller and need sharpening much more. If you can pause maybe on some of the teeth, and you could kind of see what, you know, kind of shape they're in. There is that tip of the tooth that has that little white dot, which means that it's a rounded, you know, edge on that tip of the tooth and on the actual edge of the plate. You want it to be a fine straight line so that there's no raggedy edges or jaggedy edges from like when you hit stones, or if you hit rock, or if you hit, you know, something else. Now here you can see, it's a real close-up view, you can see the edge of these teeth here that are, you know, not quite good. Right there you can see that one. That definitely needs sharpening. You can see how raggedy that edge is, and the tip of it's got that white kind of mark on it. So again, just a few swipes and you've got it looking pretty again, because you want pretty teeth. Pretty teeth are nice in the woods. So there you go. There's a real bad one there too. You can see it's real rough, and just kind of take the edge of that off. And you know, some of them you can see are taking a little bit more effort to get them sharpened. And again, you do all one side, then you do all the other side. But yeah, if you see that little bit of brownness on the top, a little burning, that usually means your teeth are dull. So you need to sharpen them up. So there you go. There's a little sharpening action close up that you can see. And again, tap it out every once in a while, your file, to clean the filings out, and then just go to town. So there you go. There's some filing done. Number 2 is bench grinding. I do not own a bench grinder, but I'm going to show you some pictures of some, and I'm going to do a little talking about them as you're looking at the pictures. So Oregon makes probably the best bench grinders there are, and they range in price from $100 to $500. You may be able to get some that are more expensive and some less expensive, but generally range between $100 and $500. They have several different models to choose from. There's another brand called Timber Tough. I've bought some of their products in the past, and as far as I'm concerned, it's junk. There's another company called Laser that makes bench grinders, a small one. It's like $100. There's Tecome, it's T-E-C-O-M-E. They make about a $200 bench grinder, and apparently they have some pretty good reviews. They're pretty good. Another one is Vevor, V-E-V-O-R. They're like a $100 bench grinder. Don't know anything about them, other than that they're pretty cheap. And then another one that seems to be pretty good and had some good reviews is Temco, T-E-M-C-O. The nice thing about bench grinding is you're going to get a really good, consistent, sharp tooth. And it's not something that's super hard to do, because it is a vise type system that the chain locks in. There's a holder that comes down, it holds it in place, and then it's just a matter of getting your depth right and everything. But that is the most expensive, because you got to buy the grinder, then you got to buy the actual discs. Most people that are full-time professional loggers, professional arborists, they will have a bench grinder, because they sharpen lots of saws, maybe 10, 15, 20 saws. I don't know. They own a lot of saws, and they got to keep them sharp. So for them, it makes sense to have a bench grinder. And there are bench grinders that they use that do a great job. I'm sure that if you watch some videos on the bench grinders, you'll learn a whole bunch. I did. So bench grinding is another way that's a really good way, but it is fairly expensive to sharpen your teeth. Number one, this is just my opinion. I could be right, I could be wrong. I use Dremels to sharpen my chains. It's fast and it's easy. I happen to have some Dremels before I started sharpening with the chains, with the Dremels with the chains, but I found out real fast that it was actually very easy, and so then I bought another one, and then I bought another one. This one right here is my newest one. It works great. I sharpen the chains. I'm going to drop some footage in here so you can watch me sharpening while I talk in just a minute. These are my bench sharpeners, and they work fantastic. Very easy. Sharpens the teeth great. A lot of people say that, oh, you can't do that because you're gonna take the temper out or put temper into the tooth. I've never had a problem with any teeth breaking or being too soft. Yeah, if you're gonna grind a lot on them, where you're taking down a lot of the tooth because you've got some major tooth damage from hitting a piece of metal or a rock or something, yeah, then it could heat up. So just do a partial. That's what I do. I do a little bit and then go back around a couple times until you get it done. But generally, I'm sharpening every time I run out of gas. Pretty much every tank that I run through the saw, I will sharpen my chains. And the reason I do that is I want to be as sharp as possible at all times. So most of the time, all I'm doing is just slightly touching them up. So I'm basically going in there and just doing a little quick, done. So anyway, you're going to watch some footage of me sharpening now. So as I'm sharpening, you can see that it doesn't take long. You just zip in, you zip out. I go both directions at one time. I make a little mark to start with when I'm sharpening with a marker, and then I just go around until I have them all done. And I usually run all of my saws that I have with me for the day, each individually, a tank of gas through them, so I'll have either 3 or 4 saws with me, and then I'll go in to where either I have my little workbench where I can sharpen them in my office here, or I take this bad boy with me. This has a battery pack, so I take this right with me into the woods, and I keep this in my truck and my equipment, and I can sharpen 3 or 4 times with this, with one battery charge. And if you had an extra spare battery, you could probably spend a whole day and just have to use this. So that is the way I prefer to do it because it is faster and easier. One of the benefits to this method of sharpening with the Dremels, or a rotary tool for that matter. It doesn't have to be a Dremel, that's just the brand that I use. There are other rotary tools you can use. You don't have to take your chains off. You can just leave them right on the saw and sharpen. When I'm using my Dremel or rotary tool to sharpen my chains, I use a stone bit that is the same size as the chain. These are the ones I use. It is a Oregon brand, 7/32. You get 3 in a pack, and they are about $6, so about $2 a piece. And I usually get about 4 to maybe 6 or 7 sharpenings with one bit, and then it starts to get a little bit of a wear on it where the shape is starting to go, and I just swap them out. And then I just use these for doing other things. But anyway, there you go. So that's the brand I use. This is what I use the Dremel for. And these are the ones you should not use. Like I mentioned before, this is the Tough Timber brand. Crap, don't use them. They're not made for high speeds. They'll just fall apart on you. They're made for a tool that goes around about one turn about every week or so. I don't know. They were bad. I've bought them a couple times thinking I had a bad batch, but they're terrible. So there you go. So now I'm going to sharpen these teeth, and these teeth are pretty bad. I actually purposely went out and cut some blacktop just to dull them really good so you can see how dull they are and how sharp you can get them just by going in quick with the Dremel tool with the stone on there. These teeth were bad. They were rounded. The tips were right off. You can see how sharp that tip gets right there. And just going in and I'm not pushing very hard at all. The stone is just barely touching the metal. You can see by how little the tooth itself, the top plate, how little it flexes when I'm up against it there. It's just tickling it. I'm not pushing hard at all. Like when you file, you got to actually put a lot of force into it to get, you know, the file to go across. But here you can see how sharp that gets, how quick it gets sharp. it does work fantastic. And that little bit of smoke you're seeing there, that's oil that is on the chain and a little bit of sawdust that is on the actual tooth itself that will burn because it gets a little warm. But it's nothing that's going to hurt the tooth. I've never had a problem with it. You can see how rounded this one is. That was a bad one. But yeah, just go in and out, and you can sharpen them pretty darn quick this way with a very little effort without having to take the chain off. And again, I have the Dremel that has the battery pack, so I can take that out with me on location, and I can do it right on the tailgate, or I can, at the end of the day, or if I want to take a break, I bring all 3 saws in on my workbench, and I just sharpen them right on the workbench. And I don't even have to put them in a vise because I'm not putting hardly any pressure on it at all. And it works really good to do it this way. This particular example, I do have it in a bench because I wanted to have it real steady so that it would be good for the camera. You can see how rounded these teeth are. I mean, they're bad. And it fixes them up real quick, and they look fantastic. And it's easy. So when I'm sharpening, I don't have to take the saw apart each time. However, if I was cutting a lot on location, and I was going to say cut all day long, which I have done quite a few times, what I'll do is I'll just take along extra chains, and I'll run my saws for the whole amount of a tank a piece. When they're done, you could slap on, and I've done this, just new chains, 3-4 new chains on your saws, and then cut again. So you don't have to sharpen at all when you're in the woods. Sharpen when you get home. So there is my #1 way to sharpen chainsaws. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of what you can do and possibilities, maybe what you want to try. My recommendation is try them all. That'd be a good idea. Sharpening with a file is definitely a technique that takes some experience. Sharpening with a bench grinder is kind of pricey for those of you that are just starting out. If you're going to go big and you're going to sharpen a lot because you're going to cut a lot, then it probably makes sense to get a bench grinder. But for me, with what I do for volume, because I'm just a part-time guy, I like using the little hand grinders because they work great. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Please hit the like, subscribe button. That'd be awesome if you did. And tomorrow, I'm going to be back in the wood yard. You should come along. It'll be fun. Between now and then, get out in the woods and get cutting. And while you're there, say goodnight to Irene.